policy for billing adjustments.
Okay, so we had an issue a while ago that we had underbilled a customer, and we reported it out to the board, and we discussed it. I think it was at the September 6th meeting. I want to say September 6th.
I remember.
And the direction was to come back at a committee level to figure out if we need a policy on how to deal with billing adjustments. That particular example is the property right along El Camino, or San Marcos Boulevard, right where Discovery hits on the north side. And it was a sewer billing issue. We underbilled by $24,000 over a 3-year period. That's as far back as we calculated, because legal advice said you can't go back any further than 3 years. So we sent this customer, sorry about that letter. We said, hey, our billing error, but this is services that you've benefited from and it's due. And please contact us and we'll set up some arrangements.
We talked to
wanna
them
be
first, we
flexible.
don't just send them a cold letter.
Right,
so,
true.
you know, it's
Good point.
a little more personable.
We gave them a heads up, so they knew it was coming, but they never did contact us in a way to try to set up payment. They basically sent a letter that says, your error district, we don't think we should have to pay. And that's as far as it's gone. In the meantime, we had the conversation with the board, and we said, well, let's not pursue that particular example until we talk to the committee. But it is our normal practice, and what we would prefer to do is treat that kind of separate from any discussion here unless directed otherwise.
We're
Say,
just gonna discuss the
we're
policy.
just going to discuss the lack thereof.
Or the lack
Right.
thereof.
Yeah, and should we continue to, because our recommendation is let's just go forward and work with this customer to get the billing done while we're developing a policy or whatever direction
Right.
the
Okay.
committee may have. So
No.
Tom, would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, did you have a question?
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I'm surprised that, ongoing, if it's been more than 3 years, how many more years has it been, and why was it not found sooner?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that I think we need to figure, how can we identify that we're not misbilling in a shorter, much shorter period, so that we don't you send me a $24,000 bill, I'm gonna go, wait, crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, that's $666 a month.
Yeah, clearly this wasn't just a regular residential
No,
customer.
that I understood that as soon as I did the math.
Yeah,
However, if you're a big guy even, that's still a chunk of change, and
that's a
you're going,
chunk of change.
right. So, did we find out how we missed it?
Yes,
Have we figured out a way to plug that hole?
yes. Yeah, so specifically for this one, but it's kind of like the same routine we do. This doesn't happen frequently, but
Right.
it happens. In this particular one, the way it happened was that we have what's called return to sewer for commercial customers when we bill them for sewer. So all residential customers get a fixed charge for sewer. Commercial customers are based on flow. So it starts with your meter flow, and if we assume 100% of your water, your metered water goes back to sewer, then just 100% of your water for commercial, it gets billed at $4.57 a unit. But some businesses have processes. Some have it's a meter that has both domestic and irrigation use. So then we might have a factor to say, well, 100% doesn't return to sewer. So a common is 95%, another common is 80%. So, and we don't go through a detailed analysis, but we may look at hourly reads on a meter to isolate their irrigation use. So we can obviously see what their irrigation use is and say, hey, 20% is going to irrigation, so we're going to charge you 80. In this case, it was transposed. Instead of having 80% return to sewer, and it's nomenclature, we say the discount's 20, the return to sewer is 80. Well, they flipped it, and they put 20 to 80. So what we did, we ran, it's easy to run, now there's 2,200 business customers that go on flow, so there's not a huge number of customers. It's easy to do just a data query and see who has a discount, and do any of them have more than a 50% because discount, so less than a 50% return to sewer. That looks kind of suspect.
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing we're going to do on a regular basis now too. You run the query and say, okay, boom, and then we've been investigating some of them.
Yeah.
Haven't found
There
another
may
one.
be a good reason why they have very little return to sewer. For example, if they're a water bottling business, but they put water in bottles and they sell it.
Yeah.
They're not flushing it down the toilet.
Right.
So there may be justification, but, so what Tom's saying is we run a query just to kind of shortlist the ones that may be incorrect data entry, and then we look at those. It's
Yeah.
a small set, and some we may say, oh yeah, that's an exception, that number's right, and some will say, oh no, that number's transposed, it should have been something.
And how often are we doing that now, this query?
Well, we did it for all of them now.
Right.
So certainly the new ones coming in, we're scrutinizing them a little bit more.
Oh, so, and then once you've established that, you don't need to look at it again?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
we don't
So-
re-enter it every month.
Right.
We enter it for the customer,
No.
unless they change their use.
Right.
So if a new person moved into
Uh-huh,
there and says, hey,
right.
I'm no longer doing that, I'm doing this, then we would revisit it.
Yeah.
And so then you just check the new
Mhm.
customers
Yeah.
at a month or 3 after they're been in service?
Right, and that's not the only thing we looked at. We also, and this is Mike, our finance analyst, so Mike will also query accounts to see if they've been set up. Because sometimes we'll set up an account, but we won't turn on a certain code. So he does a query now where he can look and say, hey, did we not turn on something? And so it's getting a little more thorough about how we check for all kind of errors.
Okay.
So on this particular one,
Mhm.
what brought it to our attention? Since this has been going on for 3 years anyway,
Yeah.
and it was a transposition, and it's very obvious, you know, we transposed
Mhm.
the, in the thing. What brought it to our attention to begin with, do we know?
I can't recall this one specific one, but some we do another, this might have been from another query that we do periodically to see, is everybody, you know, paying capacity or, you know, using either water or sewer within their capacity, and it might have just come up that way.
And
It's
just
like,
had-
this is a funny one, it's,
There you go.
why is it 80/20? And then we looked at
I
it.
asked John Fusco before he left, and I said, how did you catch this one? He said, well, we do routine surveillance of accounts. And during that routine, he didn't get into the specifics, the details.
And that is a
what we're looking
random
for.
thing, I'm guessing.
And I don't know the specifics of that, but we do
Periodic.
proactive
Yeah.
account surveillance, and that turned out this one.
So we do routine surveillance, and we always kind of have,
Mhm.
though we don't know exactly the policy.
Right. Yeah.
And now we're adding the query,
Mhm.
and we did everybody's, or we are in the process of doing everybody's, and then
Mhm.
we'll,
Yeah.
okay. And then we also are doing the scrutinizing them further as far as the second number you just mentioned with Mike, the turning it
Oh,
over.
that's just an example of one of the things we'll also look
On
at that are
those-
funny, you know.
Okay,
And that's, you know, in the past, we had that error. We had, the customer's been receiving water for a year, what happened? Oops, they didn't set the little,
we didn't turn it on.
kind of like a
Mhm.
basic switch in our North Star, in our billing system,
Right.
to say you gotta enter a code in here. Somebody forgot to enter the code. Well, it's a
Okay.
pretty easy check if you just line them up and see, hey, who doesn't
Yeah.
have a code?
Right.
If I were a commercial account, that would, apartments,
Mhm.
a commercial under this, or that's multifamily is different?
Multifamily.
Is
yeah.
it different than this commercial?
Different in,
Are
it's
they-
still return to sewer.
Okay, I just was wondering if
Same,
I,
we'd bill a
we
sewer
will
probably the
return to
same.
sewer. So if you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, for multifamily, we would not bill a sewer the same, that's a set rate.
Okay,
It's
that
not
was
a
my
return
question
flow,
was,
yeah.
I was wondering if you had a building and you have 100 units, and you know that 20% of it is going to your landscape,
Yeah.
but at the start, you don't have everybody there.
Yeah.
It wouldn't matter, because as more people came in, your usage would still be
That
80/20.
Typically, you'd have a separate
Yeah,
meter, so
okay,
it
right.
wouldn't be this,
Okay.
it wouldn't apply, you know, you'd have a separate meter.
There's no way.
Okay. The only way this is applicable is when you have the same meter for your irrigation and for your domestic use.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Nowadays, we'd spec a separate irrigation meter.
So this was basically $8,000 a year less. So I
Yeah.
could see why even maybe the person there didn't, if that's how they started out, probably wouldn't.
If they were like that from the beginning, they
If
wouldn't know. They'd
Yeah.
say,
they
hey,
wouldn't
why am I
have
getting-"
known.
Yeah.
Is there any way to track this to the beginning?
We did.
And it's been that way from the beginning?
Yeah, I think it was like 4 years.
It was,
or
yeah, it
something.
was 4.5, I think, it was just between
4.5,
4 and 5 years.
Oh, it's not that old an account?
No.
Well, yeah, there's been a change in the type of usage at some point in time. The building's been there for a long period of time, but there was a new business or new usage there.
Okay, so we have these processes, and then do you have these processes, are they in a policy?
Yeah.
It's a
You-
practice.
A
Not a
practice.
written
Yeah.
policy, yeah, just a
Practice.
Yeah.
And where do we
Well,
record? Where do we keep practices?
Well, right now, and I don't know if they included in this was kind of before then, what John put into place before he left was a write-up of procedures. So everybody had their own SOP. So
Oh.
if you were hit by a truck or won a lottery, so let's say
This
won the
is what
lottery,
you do.
that's a better one.
That is better.
Somebody should be able to sit in your place and say, oh, there's the procedure. So this might have actually been after those were written up, but that's a good one to say, hey, make sure you put that like,
And it's called a what?
procedure. So everybody has their own procedural
It's called
manual.
an SOP or something?
Oh, I'm sorry, as statement of.
Oh,
what is
statement.
it?
Standard
What is that?
operating.
Standard operating procedure.
SOP.
SOP, yeah, standard operating procedure. And
So-
there's-
Which is, those are
Normally-
usually at a staff level, so that's not.
Right, I mean, it's not ours, I'm just
Right.
asking,
Yeah.
so what I'm trying to say to you is, we had this and it looks like a very honest error.
Right.
And regardless of what we do with this thing, it's not a policy, I understand. But normally it'd be a standard procedure, and so you've put these things into action
Right.
Mhm.
to prevent it, so do those become standards of practice
Mhm.
that staff's aware of? I don't care that I'm aware of
Yeah,
them,
typically
except if
that's
it
what
goes
they do.
wrong and then I wanna
Right.
nail you to the wall.
It's kind of our set of
Be
rules
sure you know
for
where those
staff.
holes are.
Yeah,
In this instance, I'll be sure, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I didn't think about that. That might have happened after they wrote up the SOP, so I'll be sure they added to it.
and I think if we put a specific time frame on this, that every 4 months, they need to review this.
Mhm.
That's a good one, yeah.
That
Yeah.
way, we know.
we'll
that-
do a couple quarterly.
Yeah.
We'll do a quarterly
Okay, quarterly
account
is,
review
yeah,
for the criteria that we've identified.
right,
And we'll do that review, it'll turn up a certain number of ones that don't meet the criteria. Staff will run those to ground, and hopefully a very small number come out as, oh, that was an error.
yeah,
And then we figure out, now what do we do with it?
yeah. Because I recall a couple, 2 years ago or so, 2 maybe and 3, that we had 2 water accounts that were big, and we sent them a bill. And although their
I
meter
think
was
those are ones
X,
that we forgot
they were
to-
using
Turn on?
more,
Yeah, turn-ons.
that was a turn
I
on?
think so, I think that was
Yeah,
when we,
well, both businesses have been around forever,
yeah.
and it was, based on the meter size they had, they were supposed to have X amount of use, and they had 10 times X,
Yeah.
and then we sent them a bill. So if we do this for both sewer and water on this quarterly basis, and we see this exorbitant use of the water, then we know, hey, we need to talk to these people, because they're using more water than they're supposed to, even if they can't. I mean, my thought at the time when it was brought to me was, well, I'm paying for the water, what the difference does it make what size meter I have? But I guess
It does.
the capacity fee
Yeah,
Yeah,
connects to the water meter usage, which connects to the meter size.
Right.
correct.
And so, if we do this on a quarterly basis for both water and sewer, then we should be able to see those anomalies and,
Yeah.
rectify them immediately.
We actually, just to give you a little history, we actually had a dedicated staff person to just what you're doing, what you're saying. And by ordinance, by, statute, by our ordinance, for sewer, we were very active and we had the legal capacity to go back and say, whoa, you're flowing way more than your capacity, you owe us this many EDUs. And we did, for a while, we were billing that. For water, we didn't have the capacity until 1999 when we had an ordinance that we put in place. And so 1999 is like a magic date. I think it was April 20th. I almost remember the date. And we'd always say, well, when did they put the meter in? It's like, oh, it's after, or before 99 we couldn't do anything about it.
Right.
For that reason. We're probably the only district that actually had gone back and actually looked and say, you're deficient in your capacity, pay us more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we adjusted our ordinance to allow for a lease of capacity, because you can imagine a person coming in, they didn't buy the capacity, the owner, the developer did the capacity. So people don't even understand this whole thing about, we're publicly owned, you own a piece of the capacity, and but you only own this much. People, and so when we had we had these adjustments, we had to explain it to the customer, because they had no idea, and then we had to nail them with the bill. So some of the
Mm-hmm.
EDUs were excessive,
Yes.
so we allowed them to lease capacity up to an extent. So when they went over, they'd pay. If they lived within the capacity, then they wouldn't get a bill for the,
Right,
they
for the
wouldn't
overage.
get a lease. So that worked out well. But we just don't have, and then it doesn't happen with current accounts, with relatively recently added accounts. Because now we have a deal with the city where for tenant improvements or things like that, where, they let us know, we work cooperatively with the city, with things like that. And we had issues, great example, Gold's Gym, or what did Gold's Gym become? It became some other gym, but anyway. And then they switched from, this was on Norrell, by Quosco. And then they switched from a gym to hair salons. And so they had like 20, a big, a salon thing. But nobody, they did the TIs. They might have done it without even, I don't know if they did it with city approval or not, but that totally escaped us. And it's like, whoa, they only have one EDU of capacity, but they use so much more, and that was difficult,
Yeah.
But those are the type of things, particularly with the capacity, that we need to be aware of when things change. So it's not as big of an issue anymore because we took care of all the oldest ones, and newer ones. You can go back to the app and say, "Whoa, you applied as a warehouse, now you're a restaurant. You owe some more capacity." That's
Yeah.
a little bit easy to go after.
Well, I think if we put this on a quarterly review for both sewer and water, then we should be able to catch these anomalies quickly, and then it's not gonna be as painful for
Yeah.
somebody to get an $1,800 bill as
Right.
opposed to a $24,000 bill.
Yeah, the billing ones are I don't want to say easy, but they're a little bit quicker to adjust. The capacity ones, that's why we actually had a full-time person in there. So
Yeah.
that if we're still going after capacity, that would be
A lot of work.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
can you
And
just
at
look
this
at the
time-
bill?
we can find them. Finding them is easy, but then pursuing them, because like I said, those were big bills, and then we have to change it. We have to work with engineering to go back in the system and track files and say, well, what did they apply for? And then things.
But yeah, but well, isn't it a usage check?
Mhm.
I mean, if somebody is
Yeah.
using, 50 units a
Yeah.
month,
Sure, you could say,
then,
yes,
wow, we better look at what this is.
they have this type of
Absolutely.
meter.
Yeah.
If they use more than this amount of water, they're in excess of
Yeah.
their capacity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's we can include in the quarterly
Yeah,
check.
okay, all
But
right.
Pursuing them is a little time
I think
consuming.
at this point we may find there's not, at first we need to discover it, and then if we
Mhm.
discover a lot of them, we can look at how we'd like to pursue it.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume it's not gonna be a lot, and we won't have this problem moving forward.
It may
With
be,
the
on the
practice.
water side, it may be a lot, but those are the ones that were set before '99.
And maybe
Can't do anything
we
about it.
can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't go back.
Well, one thing you'll notice, whenever you start looking for things, you find them.
Of
So
course.
we may
Yeah.
find a bunch of them early on, but then after, as time goes on, there'll be less and less
Right.
as we go forward.
That
So-
would be the intent.
Yeah, so if we do this quarterly review, don't be surprised if we come back and say, hey, we found another 10, but then maybe found 2, found 1, found none.
So, coming back to what we're trying to do is to come up with a district policy for billing adjustments. At this point, we don't have a policy,
Correct.
except we know legally we cannot go back further than 3 years.
Yeah. We
Our
have,
policy is, we can go back for 3 years, and then we can negotiate what seems fair.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, every case is gonna be different, I don't know how the policy can be.
Well, what we have now is ordinance 186, and it's very basic. We like it. It's
Or
Alright,
two,
well,
good.
that's-
We're
Yeah, I
going
got
to
it.
say- So here's a little packet, within there is the is the
Oh, yeah.
ordinance, ordinance
Oh,
186,
thank
so
you.
we'll take a look at that.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, oh, sorry, you don't have mine? Oh, wait, one. But anyway, on page 186, and it's a very simple statement there. The first page of 186,
Right.
1.1.
Yep.
Pay for service. And that's kind of what we rely on. When a bill's presented for service, you gotta pay it. So it's we've never had to shy away from going after a billing adjustment or an underbilling. We've always been able to go after them with that. But the question, for the direction from you would be, do we want to develop something a little more refined and a little more structured, or do we like the flexibility we have now?
Yeah, flexibility is always good.
Yeah,
And
It's critical.
sometimes just the magnitude of an issue makes you think something that 24,000, that's a very rare exception.
Yeah,
The majority that we'll find are probably much smaller and won't be as the shock value to it, but we'd still, my recommendation is that we pursue the collection for the outstanding, for the services that have been provided.
And that's what we would that's their normal course, but we want to just wait until we talk to you and let you
But
know.
the one thing I would
We're
say,
doing.
the bigger the number, the more flexible I think we should be. And that's
Right.
just, that's internally we
Absolutely.
are. So that's why we asked them, contact the district and we'll work out a payment plan.
Right.
My recommendation would be if we're going back 3 years, we'll go forward. We'll let you pay it over a 3-year
Yeah.
period. We don't,
Mhm.
we're not expecting you to write a check for $24,000
No.
today. That would be unreasonable.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, my feeling is the policy is that they're gonna pay, and we expect them to pay, and when you don't, we go after the money. Now, there can't be a policy on how you achieve the money, because every case is different.
Right.
And some will need 3 years, and some may need 6, and some may wanna pay you in one lump, and some may wanna sue.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that,
yeah. So
I mean, I
that's
think
the
this-
scenarios.
covers it? I
Yeah,
don't see any reason to
Right.
build another one, but I can see where the issue of that particular account will probably come up again.
Right.
Mhm.
In the
Yeah.
beginning of that
Closed
packet
session.
is the original letter we sent to that account
I got
holder
that.
and their response. So
Mhm.
so that's in there as well.
yeah. Right. And how do we implement the quarterly review of that? Just by verbalization, or are we gonna
Oh,
put
yeah.
that into a?
No, you don't need a policy for
Okay.
that. That'll just be something.
And
we'll
to
do.
write to the SOP, you know.
Right,
we should
right,
so,
mhm.
so if that person goes away and somebody else comes on, oh, hey, this is what we do.
Right.
Well, when we report back as a policy committee, and we're explaining that we feel the policy right now covers it, I would like in that presentation that we do mention the standards of procedure, and that we've tightened them and added a time schedule,
Mhm.
and included water and sewer both. So
Mhm.
although we're not rewriting the policy,
Mhm.
we have reassurance and,
Yeah.
you know, and confirmation that you guys are doing your job and are aware and not gonna make the same mistake
Yeah, I
again.
think you could say the committee directed staff to update their standard operating procedures to include certain things and to do quarterly reviews
Yes.
of
To
the
memorialize
accounts.
practice, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to do more frequently, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
And if this committee wants any further involvement, you just let us know that too. Otherwise, we'll just handle it
Yeah,
from
I think
there.
you've had the direction, and I think you stated it perfectly. Put that
And
Okay.
in the report, and
I think that way,
and we'll move on.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions?
Dr. Evans, okay.
take a second.
Oh, no,
Okay.
no. We had a question that was from the public.
Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see your hand. Now, who are you?
Yeah,
Yes, Mr. Hunsaker.
I can put my name in the record unless you want. Mike
No.
Hunsaker. Are we obligated during a drought to sell more water capacity to someone who's using more water?
Are we obligated during a drought?
If you got one business, a new business comes in, or the business changes and its water consumption goes way up, does it have an automatic right to pay for more water capacity and get it, especially during a drought?
They are required to pay for capacity.
They,
But are we required to grant it? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
Yes, that's.
Oh,
the
yeah,
question.
unless,
are we
yes,
required to
unless,
grant
So
it?
if somebody with a 3/4 inch meter says, I want a 2-inch meter,
Right.
are we obligated to give
no,
them
we
a bigger meter?
don't, no.
Well, it depends on what tier we're in.
Well,
If-
if it's only an individual with a 3/4 inch meter, and they say, you know, I want, they have to prove to engineering that they have a capacity need, we don't just,
Regardless
Right.
if there's a
Yeah.
drought or not, you have to prove.
Well,
that's-
an
unless
upgrade.
we
yeah.
get to tier 3, then we don't do anything, because we are not
oh,
issuing
what,
any
you're
more
talking about our,
So
Drought
if-
drought level 3.
drought level
Right.
3, yeah, right,
Yep.
but then we don't do any further,
There's no.
nor
Yeah.
more,
depending on how severe the
Connections.
drought is, there's no
Yeah,
more connection.
but if it, unless it's in the most restrictive level of drought
Yes,
passed down to us and that we implement, then yeah, we are obligated to do it.
We are
Yeah.
obligated.
oh, yeah, it's right in our ordinance,
Yeah,
And that's part of the confusion, I think, is because our job is to provide water and to find a way to provide water for people. That's our job. And our job is to try to make sure we've covered the basics. But it isn't our job to dictate what they do with the water.
Right.
And nor until the drops the level that says you can't do anything, then we can say we can't do anything. But
Yeah, well, I'm thinking currently of agriculture.
you're
where
concerned
if
about
you've got
the,
a piece of land which has got 128 gallons per day per acre limit, and suddenly it
are
comes in
you
without
still gonna grow
water,
some marijuana on your piece of property and this is what this is about?
you know? It's about 378 acres that could be
Yes.
grown back
But
there.
if that happened, that would mean,
They have a approved use, they do, first they'll do a demand, we just give them a demand form to fill out, and then we just engineer, make sure it's reasonable, and then allows for capacity.
Mhm.
so if I had a farm, I had a nursery, a greenhouse, and I decided to plant something that took more water, and I just started using more water phenomenally. First, at this point, I'd be in the high tier.
Yep.
And it was a lot, you'd be on top of it saying what's going on.
Because our new quarterly report would say, hey, you're using more than the
You're
capacity.
using more,
Yeah,
why?
Right.
And then would then put them in the spot of,
It's a little easier with the new one because we have the demand form attached to their application. So we just go back and say, oh, you applied for this much and now you're using this much. So it's a little easier with a newer account
Yeah.
to say you owe us
To-
more.
to catch
capacity.
them.
Yeah.
But
Okay, the
so-
other-
But that's, just to be clear, that process would just mean that we're looking for them to pay more money, to buy more capacity.
Right.
Correct.
It's not an
Can't limit
opportunity
them,
for us
yeah.
to say, you can't do
No.
what you
No.
want to do.
Unless-
You just owe more money to do what you
Right,
want.
unless we are at that level three.
Where-
Right,
no.
I mean, that's the magic, and
The other one is we work with people, with developers when they come in, or with ag, whatever it happens to be, and they'll say, we want this much capacity. And usually when we tell them, it's gonna cost you this much, are you sure your demand form is right?
yeah,
And they usually, they're asking for this, saying, oh, you know what, you're right, I think we're only gonna, but that's almost like a contract, you know, it's like, okay,
Right.
now you're limited
Right.
to
Because
this.
you
And
know
that's
what they're
what
gonna
it
do, they're gonna use at the higher
yeah,
level.
and you
Yeah.
know, if it is agriculture, I mean, it's a property its own agriculture, we already know how much use or proposed usage we've applied to that
Mhm.
area.
exactly.
Yeah.
So whether they're
Planned, it's planned.
whether they're
Planned.
growing corn or marijuana,
Yeah.
that's how much they're going to use, and
Yeah.
if they use more and they have not asked for, you know, if
Right.
they've not filled out the form and said, no, I'm only going to use 200 gallons
And
an
paid for
acre,
the-
and now it's 500 gallons an acre, then we would catch that
Correct.
and find out what the story is.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's about all we can do.
Right.
All right.
Okay, I had another question. On these commercial, you have to schedule different activities and your return to sewer factors. Where is that? Isn't that something that should be part of
We
an
we
ordinance?
don't have a schedule of activities.
Well, you've got different commercial operations, and you have various factors for each return to sewer. Is that part of an ordinance, or is that just
We
a
only
common
have
practice?
a one factor, the return to sewer factor.
And where is that, I think is what he
That's
said.
It's
what
in
he's
the,
asking.
it's in ordinance 184, I think. 184 is where you'll see that. And I don't have it up. It's, if you were in our website, and if you want to finance rates, there's a list of 5 ordinances, and it's the second one. I
Okay,
think it's 184, and it has, it might have language in there like if it's more than, if it's less than an 80% return to sewer, then we need, you know, it needs to be,
Justification.
the general manager might have to sign off on it.
okay, thank you,
It may be like that, but, you know.
thank you.
All
But
right.
there's no distinction between different types of activities, it's just commercial.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to item 2, district practices for water meter lock notices.
Okay, I'm trying to remember how this formally came up, but we were asked to meet with the committee and talk about our
Okay.
practices for the 48-hour notices.
Do
I
you
think it may have come
remember?
from you, Director Evans.
Well, it came
Oh, that letter.
from our,
Yeah,
yes, I have a client, customer in my division who had, for some reason, been kind of having her bank automatically deposit a set amount of money into the water, to the bank, to pay the water.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't based evidently on anything in particular except what was comfortable for her.
right.
And then she went on a trip and she came back and she found out she was behind, owed water, and she was quite a bit behind. I forget what the amount was, like $35, $40, which means you get a notice to lock, right? Is that what the notice is called?
It's a 48-hour notice that we're gonna lock you out of.
To lock you
the
out.
service, lock the meter, yeah.
And she was incredibly, well, disturbed by it, of course, because she was thinking, I've been putting this money in, sometimes it was more than you needed and sometimes it was less. But she was very concerned that we would take a client, and she, of course, felt she was a very special client because she'd been a client for a long time and didn't like that she had to be embarrassed by that. She called in, and I commend how it was handled by the receptionist. They apologized, they explained it, there was a $25 fine that was returned to her, we didn't lock her out.
Yeah.
And then we spent a great number of calls, I know you made many of them, with her trying to suggest, what about just going on automatic billing? If you're having your bank do it, why don't you just have it be the right amount each time? And I don't know where she went with that.
She just didn't feel comfortable. In my conversation with her, she just said she didn't feel comfortable because if there was a leak and I was using more water, how would I even know? And the bank would just pay it. So she just felt comfortable paying. I think she paid like $120 a month or something. She had her bank pay, without regard to what the actual bill was.
So, and I think this particularly, she just felt a district should not treat the customers that way. So, and I think one of her requests was that we needed to look at our policy.
Yeah.
So we've agreed to look at the policy.
Okay.
So the policy, my understanding is, why don't you tell me the policy?
Well, so if you look at the same ordinance 186, talks a little bit about how we do this. So basically, we send out a bill. We break the service area
Which
into
section
how
is
many? Just looking in
Like,
section,
7?
second page.
Oh, no,
Go into section 2.
Delinquent, section 2.
Yeah. How many routes are there?
16 cycles.
16 cycles. So
Okay, 16
we don't
cycles.
go out and read all meters and bill all at once. We do it throughout the month. We'll go and just kind of rotate through there. But once a set of bills is set out, that starts the clock ticking. So let's say it's the first of the month and the bills go out. When the bill is dated and sent out, you have 20 days from the date of that billing until it's considered delinquent. So if you pay within that 20 days, you're fine. If the 20 days passes and you haven't paid yet, you're in this delinquency period. But we don't send out a 48-hour disconnect or lock notice right at the end of 20 days. Another 10 days will pass before we would consider sending out a delinquency notice. And Tom, jump in if I'm off on any of these dates. So it'll be about 30 days from the billing date is the earliest that you will get a 48-hour notice. And what a 48-hour notice means is that 48 hours from now, in 2 days, we're going to be locking your meter unless you come in and pay. And then it talks about what payment means. There's penalty charges, there's like a 10% delinquency charge, and there's a $25 48-hour notice fee.
Yeah,
I think it's
recovers the
called.
cost.
Okay.
But, so that's kind of what the ordinance says. We virtually always err on the side of the customer. We're slower to pull the triggers than what the ordinance would allow.
We allow grace periods.
We allow grace periods. So if you look at the ordinance, it says, I think it says, well, the 20 days passes, then you'll send out another notice. We actually don't send out a special second notice, we just incorporate it into the next month's bill. Because otherwise they'd get a late notice, and 2 days later they'd get their new bill. It gets confusing.
I don't know if you were here, or maybe you were here too, but we had that come before the board.
About 4.
3, was it 4 years? Was it that
It
long?
might have even been 4 years ago.
Wow, okay, it might have been that long ago. And we
I remember we went through
kind of
this.
simplified
um,
the process.
So
So
it
you're
actually,
saying that after 48 hours, we could also provide them with a 24-hour courtesy call?
well,
we do
within,
that too?
within that 48 hours. So
Okay.
we'll send out the 48-hour notice, and then we'll call them during that period of time and say, hey, your water's going to get shut off,
Okay.
You know.
now, when do we hang the ticket?
It's about 45. It ends up being about 45 days
Okay.
after the date of the notice.
Yeah.
When you add up all the you know, the 20, then the 10, and then we usually wait, did it say 4 or 5 after that? We usually
No,
It
well,
doesn't
that's in
state.
between, that's from what Angela said, but
Yeah.
according to the ordinance, it
With
just
the,
says
with the ordinance, it's 30 days.
30
Yeah.
days.
But we allow grace period of like
And the ordinance, at the end of 30
15,
days,
you know,
what I wanna make sure is that at that some time frame, then, not the call, the letter or whatever, but
You
then
get
we
the
hang
tag.
the notice. And that spark, because I've had this happen to me,
Yeah.
when during
Yeah.
that terrible
And what does the
depression,
tag mean?
you've
You
got
were closed?
24 hours.
Oh, 24 hours.
or 48?
48.
Oh,
Yeah.
even better.
Yeah.
48 hours to do something,
Yeah.
or else we're turning the water off.
Boom,
And
that's,
we-
true. That's why it's called 48-hour notice. Boom.
Right,
It's locked.
but that 48 hours is soft too, because we don't know when somebody's really gonna see it. So
Right.
it ends up being more like 4 or 5
And then
days.
we call the day before and the day of the
Yeah.
scheduled
Yeah,
box. So
they get multiple
And-
notices.
And correct me if I'm wrong, all you have to do is show up and throw yourself at the mercy of our district and say, hey, I need help on
You don't have
this.
to show up. You can call and
Or
say,
call
okay,
and,
okay.
say, we gotta work something out, I
Yeah.
gotta obviously have water. And that's what they did with me,
Mhm.
and you know, we got through it.
Right.
And I mean, that's what we've been in. I can appreciate, and I gotta believe this lady is 110 years old, been paying this bill this way, doesn't wanna change, and was just offended that we actually followed our policy.
Yes, I think she was just offended, and she was a doctor,
Yep.
whatever of what, we don't know, but that was very important to
Very
her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she just felt like I'm a good citizen, I'm a good constituent, and how dare you put this notice? And does the notice hang on your doorknob?
So let's
Mine
talk a little
did.
bit. It used to. So in the old days, meter service workers would actually go out with a ticket. It was a door
Yeah.
hanger, and they
Yeah.
put it on the door.
Yeah.
And all your neighbors would drive by and say, "Oh, look, her neighbor's
Yeah.
got a door hanger."
Oh, I got bushes in front of the house. so
There you go. That's why.
For that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He put his door in the back.
Yeah.
So it was a physical door hanger. Then I think it morphed into a letter
Yes.
in an envelope that was just kind of more discreetly kind of tucked in between
Ah.
the door and the jamb. But you may recall, I
Like a
think I
garage
sent out an
door.
email. We're actually changing that process. So the company that sends out our bills is called InfoSend.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually we have a service with them. We're now having an additional service for them. They're going to handle our 48-hour notices. So when we're ready to send out a 48-hour notice, we send InfoSend an electronic file, says these are all the people that need it. They print them out, they put it in a special envelope, and they coordinate with FedEx. So FedEx delivers it. Instead of district personnel having to drive all over the city, FedEx actually goes to these. So there's no stigma. You get a letter from FedEx, it's not a red letter from the Vallecitos Water
Mhm.
District.
Oh, that's nice.
And that's just started. I don't even know if we've made our first delivery with that.
Because we still have the
Okay.
it takes them a month at least.
Yeah, so
Be
it's
time to get
got
the
the
contract
agreement
set up.
signed and
Yeah.
it's all.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So, but that's starting soon, but so it still has some remnants of the former past, is that there's a physical notice put on people's,
Mhm.
and the law
Yes.
says you have to do that.
Yes.
So you can't just send emails, you can't just give them phone calls, you have to have a physical
written
notice.
You
notice.
have a written notice.
No,
So we provide that written notice. And if somebody gets that, and I don't know, from a practice perspective, once we send the 48-hour, when do we really shut off the water? It's not in 48 hours, it's
Yeah.
Right.
more than that.
Call,
So-
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
We'll continue.
I having again before the new system. I mean, I think the system was very appropriate, very helpful. Once I talked to them,
Yeah.
everything's fine. I just think this lady is being a little too sensitive, and
She possibly is, and I was going to ask, what is the amount, is it the time you're delinquent, or is it the amount you're delinquent? For example, if I was paying my bill like she had been doing, I just sent you, I can afford, $100 a month.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was at 103 and sometimes it was 98. Would you put me, if I was $3 late a couple months in a row, would I end up on this list?
As
No.
opposed to if you're $100
There's
short, yeah.
Yes.
There's, and again,
Is
it's
there a
not,
discretionary, is
in
there
the ordinance, there
There's
is
none.
not,
Yeah.
but there
and a standard
is,
of practice?
we actually have a trigger in our billing system, and I'm sorry, I don't know the amount, it's $35 or $50 or
I want to guess it was $45.
maybe
That
40,
sticks-
yeah, I was
that
thinking
sticks
it's
in my
around,
head from an
okay,
email.
yeah, it could be, yeah.
There's a
So
number.
she had to
yeah.
have been $45 behind.
Right, we're not gonna, in other words, we're not
For
gonna
a
shut off
minimum
somebody
of
for like $10.
30,
Yeah.
Boom,
for,
it's gotta get up to a
for
certain
30
amount.
days.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that
And
was
we don't know
set
where
at
she
like,
was. I mean, if she was out of state or something, that, you know, if you're out of town
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're just thinking I've covered it,
Yeah,
But,
so it is a, right, and I think we looked at like what the average water, what a low water bill was. I mean, if it was so small, you know, we didn't say.
Well, yeah, but if you're $45, I mean, $45, I mean, because I have,
I'm not sure.
I
about
pay
the
my
average
bill
pricing.
sometimes before I get my bill.
Yeah.
And so I go, well, you know, it's $130. And I get the bill, it's $135. Okay, big
Yeah.
deal. Well, next month, I know that I'm, so,
That's why.
but in a
pretty
couple
much,
of months
yeah.
in a row, I've been behind every time.
Yeah.
So I paid another, you've got to be behind a number of months with the wrong amount before this happens. So,
get to 45, or you just have absolutely no money and you haven't paid.
Right.
Yeah, right. If
Oh,
you don't, if you
that.
don't pay a
Right.
bill at all,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
so,
So these,
Do we feel, so I guess the real question is, if there's leniency in sending out the notice, leniency in actually turning things off, leniency in, if someone comes in, working with them in whatever ways possible,
Mhm.
the only thing I can see that could have been of some benefit to this woman is if the total had been 50 instead of 45 or something.
yeah.
But-
Mhm.
45,
yeah,
what is,
well,
I forgot, what is your capacity, what is your ready to serve fee?
How much?
35?
33?
Yeah, it's
Oh, that's
30,
for,
38.
38.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
I don't have it in front
and
of
our
me.
first, 6 units of water, or what?
that's
How much?
338,
Three something?
338,
Less than
unit.
4.
$20?
$3 or $4?
Four,
No,
less than
more
4.
that.
No, let's,
Per
For the
unit.
first 6 units.
It's 338.
It's
Yeah.
$3.38,
$3.38.
so,
But it's around $20 for the first 6
Yeah.
units.
Yeah.
okay,
so small bills, I mean, that's at $60 at least.
Yeah.
And I think that 45 might have been set, because back when we said it, that was about what the bill was.
Yeah.
right.
know, but
Well, that's all I was
It's gone
gonna
up a
say
little
was,
bit,
what is, if you were in our first tier user of, or 6 units of water and ready to serve for the vast majority of customers, is 45 realistic, or does it need to be $52 or something? But it sounds like we're in the ballpark.
But
Yes.
philosophically, without numbers, you want to say it should be the ready to serve plus the full allotment of the first tier units.
Although we've
Whatever that
spread that
dollar
first
is.
allotment out quite a bit, but I think what we are asking, we do wanna give everybody their first. And we do have to pay, you know what I'm trying to say?
Mhm.
If you're, I'm just wondering if that money could be, to the amount, could either be set as it is, or could it be tied to a philosophy of
It could be.
ready to serve in
But,
the first
You know,
tier?
so my experience in these types of things, it's easy to dive right into the specifics of a particular customer, but if I can hit the pause button for a second and maybe have Tom give you some numbers, bigger picture, how many of these are we dealing with?
Right.
How often are people delinquent? So why don't you share some of the numbers?
Actually, I didn't get the delinquent numbers, but I got the 48-hour notice. So
Okay.
delinquent's the first thing, which 10% of your bill, up to a certain amount. There's a limit, I can't remember what it is, but 10%.
$78.
$78, yeah. And so no, we're not gonna. Well, that's $1,000 bill. It was, or it's a $20,000 bill. Was it really a $1,400 effort? So it's, oh no, 78 is about the effort that that we can match to a cost. And then when the 48-hour notice comes out, we've got about in a year's period, we'll send about 1,098, I think is what we just looked at, to 48 hour notice to more, if you have more than 2, or excuse me, more than 1. It was like 5,000.
more than
Oh,
two.
wait a minute.
I think it's more than 2.
Yeah, if you get it, it was 2 or more, I think. Okay, here it is. If so, in a 1 year period from October 1 to November through November 2017, there were 9,074 48-hour notices generated.
9,000?
9,074.
Out of 22,000?
22,000
Times 12
times
months.
12. So it's about $250,000
Yeah.
bills that go out, and 9,000 times we had to say, okay, you're delinquent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
to the point of, now there's probably even more that got a 10% late notice, but they paid their late notice before the 48-hour
Yeah,
notice.
okay.
Mhm.
Could have been more. This is just 48-hour notice. 4,000 of those Oh, those represented 4,092 customers. So
Those 9,000,
4,092 customers.
4,000 out of 20.
So out of the
Two.
9,078, out of 9,074, 4,092 customers. So in other words, some of them got more than one.
Yeah.
okay.
And then out of the 4,092 customers, 1,940 of them received them. Oh, more than 2 notices, right? Yeah, I
Right.
was trying to get to.
So some people are,
Repeat offenders, which should be a factor.
And
Right.
it's, and that's they know who those people are.
Well, so for example, this woman that called, if this was her first time ever
I think it
being
was.
late and she was only over by a little amount, okay, yeah, we would certainly be more flexible with her
Mhm.
than somebody who every
Right.
other month they're delinquent.
And that's a precedent that we have too, is a practice that, okay, one time, but if it happens, even if it's 1 year later, it happens again, we don't waive the fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, and if I can just interject too, you know, we've done, whenever we do these changes, and then frequently we'll do, hey, what are you doing, other agencies, and we are pretty lenient compared to other agencies. Other agencies will say, what, you give an adjustment for a leak? We'll do like a one-time, you know, and again, same thing, only once, you know, but, and, you know, some agencies, I don't wanna say the names of them, but,
Right.
one of them that begins with the letter V, forget about it,
Mhm.
they will, there is no adjustment, you know, you have a leak, you pay for your water, so.
Yeah.
So I think as we stand, you know, compared to other agencies, we're pretty kind. These customers, these 1,000
Yeah.
customers might not think so.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if you've
Compared
been,
to other ones,
if you've
yeah.
been late
Yeah.
more than a number of times, then, yeah, you got a
Yeah.
problem, and
We
I don't
don't
know how to
like
get it
these.
resolved, other than, you know, you're gonna have to pay your bill.
Yeah.
I think the policy, the way it stands, is very flexible, very lenient, and we don't need to do anything.
I don't think so either. I think the most important thing is to speak about it. And I think it's important, as you said, to take the big picture. And I think, and the bottom line for customer service as a district, it's not that you received a notice, which is, well, she could say it was a robocall.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's true, but that's efficiency.
Right.
Yeah.
Where the importance of the district is that personnel is willing to work with you. That we talk to you as the customer, if you come in,
Yeah.
we do what we can. Now
Absolutely.
granted, if you're in the 1,000 and your life is, you know, living from moment to moment,
Yeah.
we can't do a whole lot for you.
Yeah.
But I think what's important, and you know, I did end up, you saw, I sent her quite a long apology without saying she was right or wrong, but that, you know, and what was, and she, in the end, she said, I thank you for the apology. And I thought, well, okay, she didn't jump on me anymore.
Yeah.
So hopefully she's okay. But I did say that we were gonna look at the policy, so now we can say we looked at
And-
it and we feel that it's,
And this is
When
not,
here.
like you said, robocall, this is not some pre-recorded call. We are physically making a physical call to a physical person.
Well, we're
Well-
doing the reverse 911, I think.
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
One of
Reverse
our
911 is
people
we'll record
does
a
record,
message.
it's a district
Oh.
personnel, but then it goes out en masse to all the people.
Oh,
on the
okay,
list.
fine.
well,
Yeah,
and
that's
even as a
okay.
robocall, I meant, we do not have an individual sitting there going through the count saying, oops, they're $45 over. We have that done through the computer system.
Right.
Oh, right.
Right,
yes.
So
yeah,
what I'm
but it
trying
is
to
that,
say
but
is-
it is a personal recording going out to all these people.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
once you
okay, fine.
call, we don't have the computer saying, you're 45 days late, you owe us $732, please
Right,
pay.
yeah.
So
Not a
I
computer
think
voice, yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
hopefully we can prove our worth to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, like Tom said, I think we are very flexible. We work well with the customers.
Mm-hmm.
Quite honestly, we get very few complaints. I mean, people aren't happy when they get a late notice, but I think most of them realize, yeah, I'm late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And this
most
is-
But that, as I mentioned a year ago, when that couple was out of town and they had this late notice and couldn't get the bill in or something, and then they came in and they were just overwhelmed with how gracious the staff was and how willing it was to work with them. I mean, they commented at the Boys and Girls Clubs where it
Yeah.
was
Yep.
a year ago. So, I think it's fine.
Okay, so we'll leave it the way it is. We'll continue to exercise judgment. We'll do everything we
Yeah.
can to work with customers.
Exactly.
So,
Okay.
all right.
And then see how the FedEx works. And
Yeah.
a lot of
And I-
people, a lot of agencies are using that.
I think
Yeah.
that's important. So when we also do a report, can we just do a quick review?
Sure.
Very quick review of Other than just minutes, I prefer a little quick review, whether it's me talking or you got staff is more than willing to just say, we reviewed the policy, this is where we show our lead, this is where, and this is where we, da-da-da-da-da.
Okay,
So that the whole board doesn't just have Jim and I going, oh, it's great.
yeah,
We're, you know, we can just say, we've looked at it, we talked about it, we feel it's really great, and we'd like staff to present
okay,
briefly.
all right, we can
Does
do
that
that.
sound
Yeah.
good?
That'll
Do
be
you
this
have
Wednesday.
any questions on
Yeah.
this?
Yes, I want to make a comment that I found the VWD was very compassionate and very understanding, and is to be commended for those. The question I have is regarding to large water users. If they know this is policy that they can just skip every other month and pay it off every 2 months,
Yeah,
is that being abused?
I don't see a pattern like that, no. Yeah, they couldn't skip a month of without paying, we'd get them, you know, if it's
Yeah.
20 days, they get a 10%, or, you know, we wait till 25 days and assess the 10%.
Okay, so you do have a penalty assessment.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the first one's a 10% late fee, and the second one's the 48-hour notice, it's just recovering cost of delivering a notice, it's
So you're
25
covered
bucks.
there.
Right.
Great.
Yeah.
so this experiment we're having with InfoSend and FedEx, it's not really saving us any money, but it's freeing up a lot of our staff time.
Good.
So instead of them driving all over the district,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
putting door hangers, they're out doing things that are valuable,
Mhm.
so.
Okay.
I think that's great. I thank you
Yeah.
very much.
All right.
Any further comments?
No,
Thank you for your time, Jim.
thank you.